And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. Unfortunately, a deflated episode after another Indiana defeat, as today the Hoosiers fall at the hands of the Michigan State Spartans, 74 to 72. It's a game that was tied at halftime at 34. Michigan State really took control over the next 16 minutes of the second half, eventually building it up to a 67 to 56 lead at the under 4-minute timeout. And from there, it looked like Indiana finally started playing with a sense of urgency, especially on the defensive end. And the Hoosiers ended the game on a 16 to 7 run, which culminated in Yogi Ferrell being at the line with a couple of free throws to tie it up. The first one rimmed in, the second one rimmed out, and with it, possibly, may have gone Indiana's NCAA tournament hopes. This is a team that obviously has been pretty solidly in the tournament for much of the season, as long as we've been discussing the tournament. But now with these three straight defeats, I guess we'll have to see where all the bracketologists put it, but this loss is certainly going to hurt the Hoosiers. I'll be your host today on this episode of the Assembly Call as we break down this IU loss. I'm Jerod Morris. Ryan Phillips is here. He seems to be having a few technical issues, so if for some reason you just get a lot of me talking, it's because Ryan's having trouble getting his computer to work. But I suppose that would be kind of fitting just with how this season has gone. To start out with a banner moment, I think, again, it's been really tough over these last three games to talk about banner moments and moments that lead us to believe that this Indiana team, this Indiana program is on the right track to hanging that sixth banner, which is, of course, all of our number one goals. But I think, I watched the last 4 minutes, and I tweeted this out, that it's great to see the guys fighting and scratching and clawing and that grit, and it's great to see that, and it's what helped this team battle back. But it's almost more frustrating than it is encouraging because you wonder where that is the entire game. And I get that there's a certain sense of urgency at the end of a game, especially when you're down at the end of a season, that you can't manufacture. So there's always going to be something extra there at the end of a game like that. But why can't we play like that 80 or 85 to 90% of that level all the time? I don't understand it, and I think that's the biggest question mark, the biggest frustration that I have with this team this year is the ability is there, and I think we saw it at the end of the game, but just the inability to really focus on defense, to have any sort of plan to play with that kind of fight is what has killed this team. And you see it there over those final 4 minutes of the game, but it's just too little too late and not enough. And it results in a 2-point loss that you look at it and you say, man, if we had brought that the other 36 minutes, surely we can find 2 more points in the game, right? And, so I feel a sense of deflation at this game. I did, as obviously after the Iowa game, as we led into this game, I started to feel a lot better about our chances. And certainly there at the end, we had that last little bit of hope that, hey, maybe we can still do this, and to not. Just very disappointing, and it's a very disappointing cap on what looked like such an encouraging season for a while, but has ended with such a thud that it can't be characterized as anything other than disappointing. Anyway, we're going to talk about this game, break it all down. That's my opening. I will now turn it over to Ryan and get his rant on this Indiana loss.
Yeah, I mean, really, just for once, I'm usually pretty loquacious, but I just have no words. I mean, that was just so deflating at the end there to have your best player and your best free throw shooter lining up, and I gotta admit, I turned to my mom and I said, "There's no way he makes these both. It's just that it's too much pressure on one guy." It really is, because I mean he is literally shooting there for his coach's job, I think, and we said we were going to talk about that very much, but I think that it's become such a big deal around the Indiana world. I mean, he's got that on his shoulders, and it's unfair for that to be on one player, and for a guy in Yogi who had such a great game, just a fantastic performance, and he kept Indiana in the game. And at the end, to have it come down to, the world is on his shoulders, and both free throws were off. I mean, and he's an 85% free throw shooter. One luckily rolled in, but you knew that it just had to end that way. And I'll give some of the guys on the team credit for fighting at the end, and I think that one thing we should all realize from this is that Indiana should be pressuring people on defense. If you're going to give up points anyway, you might as well do it fighting. And I just to watch this team. I mean, Michigan State is a very well coached team. They almost blew this game because of their lack of ability at the free throw line, but they tore apart Indiana's zone today, and I really think. I mean, I've been a supporter at times where, hey, it's okay to mix in a little zone just to give teams a different look, get them out of rhythm. But we played zone for far too long today, and Michigan State just picked it apart at every turn, and we were just completely undisciplined in it and overplayed, underplayed. Every single adjective you can put together to describe it would be fitting, because it was awful and very hard to watch. And I think it's one of those things that's just in guys' heads now. They're either overthinking or not thinking enough, and it was just awful to watch. And it's a team that has so much talent but just can't get out of its own way. And defensively, that's been the issue all season. I think at times this year the zone has been okay earlier in the year, but over the last few weeks it's just been decimated. And I think it's time to get rid of that. If Coach Crean is only guaranteed one more game with this team, he needs to go down fighting and not playing a passive zone that's getting absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, hold that thought on defense because I want to come back to it. I just want to say about Yogi, I see some tweets coming in. I said, don't hang your head, Yogi. You fighting and doing what you did at the end of the game got us in the position to have those free throws. And I get that. Yogi's an imperfect player. He doesn't always play that hard off the ball defense. His defense, like this entire team's, leaves something to be desired. But if you're placing any amount of blame on this loss on Yogi, I think that's a little bit misguided. The guy had 21 points, 7 boards, 6 assists. I mean, he did everything he could to help put this team in a position to win. And so I think on the list of problems with this performance today, Yogi's is at the very bottom of that list. And so I want to say that because, look, we don't know. As I wrote on the blog late last night, there's so much uncertainty. We don't know anything. Is this Tom Crean's last game at Assembly Hall? Is this Yogi's last game? Is it Troy? Is it James? I mean, there are so many things up in the air right now. We don't know anything. All we knew was that Indiana was going to play a game today, and it was important, and they lost it. And I don't know. And I guess that's why this just has such a deflating feeling. Let me ask you something. Talk about the defense, and I feel like every time at the end of a game we've had success with this pressure defense, and I guess I'm trying to find maybe some kind of reasonable explanation for why we haven't been doing this more. Isn't the reason why you don't play high-pressure defense because you don't want to give up easy shots and you don't want to give up layups? But don't we do that anyway just through our normal defense? I mean, there was a play in the first half where James Blackman Jr. had his back he was playing out at the top of the key. He had his back completely turned to Denzel Valentine, who had the ball, and shot a 3 with James Blackman Jr.'s back completely turned to him. And it wasn't really for lack of effort because James was running around trying to do something. He just looked clueless. And I saw that a lot today. We've seen it a lot all season with guys with their backs turned to the ball, just not really knowing what to do. I mean, if that's going to be how your half-court defense is, why not just pick up some pressure? At least it gets the game at the pace you want. I'm having a real hard time, I guess, following the logic, and maybe there isn't any, and that's the problem, but I'm having a real hard time following the logic of our choices for defensive strategy this year when clearly what we've been doing hasn't worked. I mean, do you have anything?
No, I don't. And you don't have to run a press for the entire game. You don't have to pressure for the entire game. But at least throw it in there every once in a while. Get the game kind of crazy. I mean, even if they get some easy baskets, at least it'll get you up and down the floor faster, and that's what you want. And it'll get them tired, too, because you're making them work to bring the ball to half court. You're making them work to get things done, and you're harassing them. And I completely agree. I've been against that for a while. But, I mean, we've seen in the last few weeks it's actually worked when they've done it in stretches. I mean, give a 5-minute stretch of pressure. It doesn't have to be your entire defensive philosophy. But this year it's hard to know what's going on because we do have a team that just does not have a lot of good defenders, and so maybe you just don't trust them or something. I don't know, though. I mean, at this point, you might as well throw caution to the wind. I mean, you've lost you've lost 3 out of your final 4, and 8 of your final 12. I mean, clearly whatever you're doing isn't working. Let's change it up and do something different. But that's us. That's what we think, and we're not coaching the team, fortunately, because I would hate coaching this team. But I would have killed myself months ago. But it's
Dude, what did we just say about suicide jokes?
All right. But no,
Jeez.
I think that you've got to change something and do something. And as it's stacking up right now, Indiana's going to face Northwestern in the Big Ten tournament, and that's a team we just lost to. And so at this point, you've just got to throw whatever you've got at the wall and try and make it stick.
So let's break down this game some. I know there's all these big picture things out there, and we'll probably look at some of that at the end of the game. But I do want to break down a few things about this game because I think it's indicative of where these two programs are right now. As I was watching the game, the thought that kept coming to me is it seems like men versus boys out there, with Michigan State and us, both in how they play physically, the way that they're the mental game. I mean, they're clearly smarter. Denzel Valentine's brain fart at the end, notwithstanding. But and Valentine's a good example. I mean, I know he had that horrible play, but he created at least 3 possessions for Michigan State with just savvy hustle. Whether it's just tapping out a rebound or just finding a way to go grab a loose ball, he does the kind of stuff. And a lot of Michigan State's guys do that kind of stuff, a lot of the stuff that we called Colin Hartman things early in the year, that Indiana doesn't really do. And those are the differences in 2-point games. I mean, this was a 2-point game where those possessions, they make a difference. And, to kind of illustrate this big picture point, I want to look at something specific, and that's Troy Williams, who I think this is now the second game against Michigan State that he's really struggled this year. And I think we've seen enough from Troy here recently to know that, I mean, he's been coming out and bringing it and bringing the energy, even in games when he struggled. But Michigan State is particularly tough for him because they really body him up. They don't let him have the space to dribble that he likes. They make it tough for him to get in and get putbacks. And I think he really struggles to find his way in a game like that. And part of it's the physicality, and part of it's just the having a veteran's understanding of, okay, the normal things I do don't work today. What else can I do to help the team? And I think a big reason why Indiana was unable to get over the hump in the second half is they just never got anything from Troy. I mean, the only 2 buckets he had were pretty much wide open dunks that anybody could have made. He only had 3 rebounds, and that's just not going to cut it for this team. And I think the next step in his evolution is not looking at a game and a matchup like this like, oh crap, this is just a terrible matchup for me, but being the one who is imposing his will and imposing the physicality on the other team. And perhaps as an upperclassman he can do that, but I think his struggles in a game like this are just so indicative of Indiana's struggles overall, where a team that's just physically tougher and mentally tougher is able to take us out of what we want to do, which is what Michigan State did for most of the game, until we changed everything that we do in those last 4 minutes and somehow made a run. But your thoughts on that, Troy specifically, and just that general point?
Well, I mean, just a general point. I mean, Trice is a senior. Denzel Valentine's a junior. Matt Costello is a junior. These guys have been through the wars. They're bigger. They're stronger. They're like you said, they're just mentally tougher. A lot of the guys they've played with who have moved on are NBA level players. They've learned from guys like that, and Indiana just doesn't seem to have that. I mean, especially with the roster turnover, Yogi's really he's the only guy, and he and Hunter are the only guys left from that Sweet 16 team. So I mean, it's not like these guys have experienced a ton of success or have watched guys experience success and know how to overcome things. As for Troy, I mean, you look at Michigan State's roster, Valentine 6'6", 220. Trice is, he's the only real small guy out there, but a guy like Costello, 6'9", 245. Marvin Clark, 6'6", 225. Alvinella, 6'4", 205. So you've got stronger, bigger guys than I think Troy is used to having guard him out on the floor. And you're seeing him struggle every time he get the ball. I mean, you got the feeling that he can usually use his athleticism and quickness to get to the rim, and he just wasn't even able to try today because he would get the ball and it's this tall, long, big guy guarding him, and he just didn't have the confidence to try and go by him or try and go in and draw a foul or something like that. So he was just deferring a lot today and giving the ball up quickly. And towards the end, he had one, he tried to make one move where he was falling away left-handed, throws it up, and it hits the underside of the rim. I mean, so it was almost like at the end, he's like, oh, crap, I haven't even scored in this game, or done anything, and we need points, so here's this. And, again, that's not what makes you successful. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough matchup for Troy. It's a tough matchup for a guy like Hunter as well. And they're going to climb up your back on rebounds. That's just the way Michigan State plays, and it's been the way Michigan State's played for a decade and a half now. And so it's just a tough game for those guys. Where Indiana needed to step up was to beat them at the guard spots, and it just didn't happen today.
Probably should have started this off for the banner moment, because there was a clear positive. We haven't even mentioned it yet, and that's the play of Nick Zeisloft, who, can you imagine where this team would be without him for the past 4 or 5 games? I mean, now, clearly we've lost most of those games, but just imagine how those would have gone, how hopeless they would have felt without Zeisloft coming off the bench and doing what he has done. I mean, Nick Zeisloft, when was the last time he missed a three-pointer in the first half? Or I should say missed a three-pointer in the first half that wasn't immediately followed by Hunter Mascara-Perea doing the most incredible putback dunk I think I've ever seen. That seems like so long ago. But just want to give Zeisloft some kudos, because, I mean, that guy has come in and stepped up as a leader when his team has really needed him. Without Hartman being able to provide the three-point shooting, with Blackman and Robert Johnson being so inconsistent with their shooting, Zeisloft has been a guy, road or home, who has just been a rock for this team. And just such a great addition. Alex Bozic, even over the summer, was talking about how big he thought the addition of Zeisloft would be. And I remember looking back at his Illinois State stats, and it's like, as I think he shot 30-something% last year. I was somewhat underwhelmed by it, but figured, what the heck, we need shooting. But he has so surpassed what I thought he could be. And again, he's not a superstar. You're not going to play him 35 minutes. He's not an all-Big Ten type player. But he was able to battle for rebounds today, got 5 boards, and I think he was more than able to compensate for what he gives up on defense with those 3-pointers and just making Michigan State have to guard him, which helped open things up for guys driving. So I thought another really good performance from Nick Zeisloft, who, in a sea of guys who seem to be fading down the stretch, he is one guy who's really emerging and has saved his best basketball for the end of the year.
Yeah, I think he should be starting. I don't think there's any question, because at the very least defensively, he may not be a great defender, but the effort is certainly not lacking. He has awareness. He's just not physically. It's like Jordan Hulse. He's just physically he has faults in his game that he's never going to be able to overcome, but the effort is there, the intensity is there. And, he also is a guy who's a leader. He grabs guys, pulls them in, tells them where to be, and you know what? We need that right now. I mean, I mean, James Blackman finished with a nice stat line today, but I thought he was a disaster for most of the day, and I was tweeting about it pretty consistently. I thought Robert Johnson was invisible as well. I mean, Zeisloft should be starting for one of those two guys, and you know what? If Hartman is back to being healthy by the Big Ten tournament, they should both start for the 2 freshmen, I think, and you get the freshman coming off the bench. And maybe that is a lesson they need to learn. I mean, Blackman hit some shots late in the game, made a driving layup and things like that, but that's too little too late, considering his lack of energy on defense. If you're a bad defender, that's fine. Make up for it with energy and desire and things like that. Dive on the floor, be scrappy. There are plenty of bad defenders who have it can impact the game on that end by doing certain things. So I think that Zeisloft has earned his way back into the starting lineup for sure, and I would like to see him getting more minutes.
I actually thought that Robert Johnson played well the first 10 minutes of the game. I thought he matched Michigan State's physicality. When the officials were allowing a lot of hand checking, there were several possessions where he really D'd up Denzel Valentine tough. I thought early he was one of the guys who was committed to driving the ball into the lane and kicking it out for threes, and he created a couple of Zeisloft's threes doing that. But as the game went on, that seemed to fade. And I think that's the big difference between a freshman and between an experienced veteran is it's easy those first 5-10 minutes to come out and play with that toughness and stick to the scouting report and kind of, do all those things that you've surely been coached to do. But it's much harder to do it over 40 minutes and do it every single possession. And I think that's the difference. There are flashes from Robert where he plays, he kind of plays like a veteran, but then, those are followed up, unfortunately, by freshman moments where he settles or is lazy on offense and turns it over, or, the defensive toughness turns into passivity on defense and gives up a bucket. And so consistency for him is going to be so key. But the thing is, we haven't had the luxury of allowing Blackman and Johnson to grow up as freshmen because they were thrust into starting roles from day one. There hasn't really been a lot of accountability for them, whether they've played well or poorly. They've played pretty much the same amount of minutes. And so, a lot of their improvement obviously has to just come internally and hopefully from what they're absorbing from the coaches, but there haven't seemed to be a lot of hard lessons that I think sometimes young guys need. I thought the lesson Troy Williams got after the Michigan State game, where Tom Crean basically sat him for most of that game, and I thought we saw a different guy after that. And I wonder if James and if Robert would have benefited from that at some point this year. And maybe you can, it seems like every game has been so big, it's like, well, you don't want to do it here, you don't want to do it there, but where do you do it? Because I don't feel like they've quite progressed as much as I would have thought from the start of the year, even though they're both, again, perspective is important. They're great players for freshmen. James Blackman Jr. is an incredible scorer. Robert Johnson, a really good overall player. And maybe it's unfair to hold them accountable for stuff on the defensive end that no one else on the team gets held accountable for. So I think really what I'm describing here is just a systemic program issue that has kind of been really, I guess, consistent for everybody this year, but I would have liked to see those guys held a little bit more accountable for their inconsistencies, and I think it would have helped their maturation process long term. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, and I think right now with Robert, you're just seeing his confidence shot on offense. And early in the season, what he would do a lot of is he'd get into the lane, and maybe he wouldn't finish, but he'd get into that lane, or he was even pulling up for some mid-range jumpers, and you're just not seeing that. You're not seeing any confidence. He's just content to not turn the corner and continue the dribble handoff weave at the top instead of trying to attack. And I mentioned after the last game that he stagnated the offense a lot. He didn't do that today, but it just still didn't seem like he was doing much. Lack of confidence in his game, and he shouldn't be. He shouldn't lack confidence. He's a very talented player, but he has not played well lately, and I think that he's gonna, this is gonna be a very big off season for him. Obviously the year's not over yet, but it's gonna be a very big off season for him and James. They've got to add other aspects to their game and continue to develop, because if they don't, they're going to be top 50 guys who wind up, getting lost in the shuffle.
I think at the start of the show, I had a difficult time articulating why this game made me feel so deflated, and I think maybe it just hit me. And it's that when you look back at this game, Yogi had 2 3-pointers that were down and out. They look good in the cylinder and they pop out. He misses that free throw at the end. You think back to all these little single possessions that if they go a different way, it's a different result. And I want to be disappointed and frustrated by that, but I'm not, because I feel like we didn't deserve to win this game. I almost feel like we didn't really deserve to be that close because it didn't feel like our play warranted it, even though we had that big rush at the end. And as a fan, I hate that feeling. I want to be frustrated and just, oh man, that three, if we make that, and if he makes the free throw, and just kind of up in arms, like almost feeling like we got cheated out of a win that we deserved, but it got pulled away. But at least you come out of it knowing your team deserved it, or you feel like they did. And I guess what's so defeating about these last few games is just not having that feeling, because the team simply hasn't fought for 40 minutes. And it's just the mentality that's been developed over this entire season, where it's almost been a self-fulfilling prophecy where, the offense was so good early, it's like, well, we're an offensive team, and the defense has almost just been neglected. It's like we, put in some man stuff and some zone stuff and a few morphing things early in the year and haven't even worked on it. And I don't know. I think that's where I feel deflated is just, looking out on that court and seeing the way the two different teams played and really feeling like the one team came to play tough, came to win, came to grit it out for 40 minutes, and they did, and we really only came to do that for a few spurts. And even with that, we only lose by 2, but, to not really feel like we deserved those extra 2 or 3 points to win is really frustrating as a fan. You don't want to do that. You always want to feel like the effort that's being put out there is good enough to win, and I just think that we haven't been able to say that enough this year. And I think as we look to things that need to change for the Big Ten tournament and need to change moving forward, that is, for me, at the absolute top of the list.
Yeah, I think that I really harshly criticized this team against after the Iowa game for just a lack of fight, and I thought that partway through the second half it was the same thing. I mean, it was just kind of they just stopped fighting, and they eventually kind of got that second wind and went for it at the end. But that really happened because Michigan State played Indiana back into the game. It wasn't like that all came from Indiana playing amazing basketball. It came because Michigan State started making errors, started taking bad shots, and started fouling and doing stupid things. And really, I mean, the effort was there from Indiana, but at the same time, it wasn't like they just went on an insane run that was beautiful basketball that got them back into the game. So, I need this team to prove something to me. I need these players to prove something to me. They don't have to prove anything to me for themselves, but it's for me to have any faith in this team, they've got to show something, and they just haven't the last few games. It has just been, particularly in second halves. I mean, we were tied with Northwestern at the half. We were, I believe, ahead by 1 or 2 on Iowa. Maybe we were behind, but it was close. And then, tied at the half of this game. And then the second half, in all 3 games, just, Northwestern ran us out of the building. Iowa completely outplayed us. And then until there were about 5 minutes left, I mean, Michigan State was dominating that game. So the team's just collapsing in the second half, and it's something that's really hard to watch. And these players need to step up.
We've got some good questions coming, actually, so I want to use these to direct our conversation now. And Ben Malcolmson asks, what do you think the recruits Maker and Bryan are thinking after watching this one? And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about recruiting because there's so many other things that need to happen in this program before we start thinking about bringing new recruits into it. But I wanted to address this question because I want to say something that might seem kind of crazy and off the wall, but if I'm them and I look and I see the one post move that Hunter Mosquera-Perea had in there, which looked pretty competent, and he scored on it, I'd be thinking, okay, why don't they at least try to get him the ball down low more? And I know he's inconsistent, and I'm not saying that's some huge strategy that you want to devote 25% of your possessions to. He's far from an elite big man. But am I crazy to think that he has shown some flashes this year of having some decent moves down there? And I just don't feel like we've really ever given him many opportunities to play with his back to the basket or even really to get him in a position to face up from 10 feet out. And it's not, he's not like an all Big Ten level player or anything, but he's shown me enough flashes to think that we should have done that more. And so if I'm those big guys, I'm looking at it thinking, why don't they at least, to have some semblance of balance on the offensive end, try to get him the ball in that position on the low block at least maybe 3-4 times a game, because I think he's shown enough that could be productive. Am I crazy, or have you seen that too?
The problem is he doesn't get great position, and so he's not usually getting the ball. If they do throw it in, he's not usually getting the ball in a good spot. Today, he used his athleticism to make some moves, and he hit a couple shots on post move type situations.
Well, the one was crazy. He just drove and flung it up. The
Yeah.
other one was an actual back to the basket play.
Yeah, I actually turned to my dad when he did that, and I just said, "Well, if it works, go ahead," But it was one of those "What do you do?" Oh, went in. Hey, and so I'm not sure. I mean, because everybody knows this offense is designed to be without a post player. I don't think that's they spent all off season working on it and all the preseason and all the you're not going to change that because Hunter Perea made a couple nice post moves. His primary job is to come up, set a screen, and then roll to the basket. And that's where he's going to get his points in this offense because we've got so many shooters. You don't want to stagnate the offense by, if you're going to have a traditional half-court post-game offense that you run through, you're going to slow things down. That's just inevitable. And so with the lack of a true post guy, you're not going to do that. And, but here's what I would say that those recruits should be seeing is, my God, how many offensive rebounds are they giving up because of their lack of size? I could come in and start next year, and all I would need to do is get rebounds. Wouldn't even need to score. I just get rebounds. I mean, Michigan State had 15 offensive rebounds, and how many of those were turned into second chance points? I lost count, but that changes the game right there. I mean, and you also, I think if you're those guys, you're not specifically looking at this team. You're looking at the last couple years when Indiana had post players, how they do. I mean, look, last year Indiana had an outstanding defensive team, which seems so weird to say at this point, but they did. They ranked very highly defensively and with rebounding, and that shows you how much one player can change things. And they wouldn't have to go zone if they had a real post player so much, and things like that. So, I think those two guys are sitting there thinking, well, I can come in and not have to compete with anybody for playing time. I mean, Hunter Perea would be relegated to the bench if either of those guys was on the team. I think we all know that. And they might play together some, but Hunter Perea is not going to beat out either one of them. As far as the recruiting thing goes, from everything I've heard, Thomas Bryant is more than likely coming to Indiana unless something crazy happens. He was down to Indiana and Syracuse, and now Syracuse is out the window. So, I regardless of the coaching situation, I just hope people show him a good time this weekend. All legally show him a good time, of course.
Yes.
And Thon Maker, that guy he's a one and done. He's going to be the number one pick in the NBA draft eventually. I don't know if he'll come, but he's going to reclassify to next year, it looks like, and he's an extremely talented guy who some are talking about being the best high school prospect since LeBron. He's going to go wherever he wants to go. I hope he has a good time in Bloomington this weekend. But, I think both of those guys, if I'm there, I'm seeing a ton of opportunity because this team has perimeter players and needs an inside presence, and both of those guys would fit that bill.
Yeah, I hope that's what they're thinking too, that they look out and say, and they view themselves as a missing piece. And again, we don't know, trying to project Indiana's roster forward from one season to the next is really difficult because there's been so much change, a lot of it unexpected. So it's, there's a lot of roles and positions on the roster up in the air, so who knows about all that. But from what I heard about Thomas Bryant, he wanted to come to Indiana. His mom was leaning towards Syracuse in part because I don't remember how it was phrased, but it was something about being at a cleaner program or a program without so many issues.
That is exactly what it was, actually.
It seemed absurd at the time, and it seems even more absurd now. So I would think that if that was really an issue, that's been resolved. So anyway, a couple questions from Brian Tonsony. And really they're related, so we'll just handle them together. He says, assess the basketball knowledge of this team, offense, defense, fundamental shot selection, who's responsible. Then there are many reasons, but honestly no excuses for what has happened. Lack of improvement must be addressed and changed. And I really think that's the issue, is that, we talk about the knowledge, the offense, the defense, the fundamentals, the shot selection. There just hasn't been much improvement in those from the start of the season. I mean, I think you think back to, the win over Butler and how well Indiana played in spurts against Georgetown and the Maryland win and some of the higher points. They're clearly that showed the potential of this team. But I just, Andy pretty much sums it up almost every time when he comes to the final thought where he's just like, I don't know what else to say, and then basically repeats something that he said from a previous show. Like, we could literally just cut and paste his audio. In fact, he's not here today. His daughter's birthday party, happy birthday to her. But we could have just, took out old quotes from him. And someone else said that to me on Twitter. It seems like you could say that every game. And I'm half tempted to just load up Buffer with tweets before the game starts and then go for a walk for 2 hours because it does feel like a broken record. And who's responsible? The coach is always ultimately responsible for that, but the players need to share some responsibility for that as well, because at no point did it seem like anybody. It didn't seem like this team was embarrassed by its defense, which if I was a player, I would be, and I wonder about that, because it just, you would think at some point someone, whether it's a coach, and if it's not a coach, a player, steps up and says, hey, we get killed on this every single game. When are we going to do something about it? And instead, this seemed like a team that was more content to basically settle with the identity of, when we make threes, we're going to have a chance to win, which is pretty much what it was almost every single game. And I will say this, I do think the rebounding showed improvement from the start of the season to the end. And so I think the coaches and clearly the team need to be given some credit there. But that rebounding has also faded these last 3-4 games, as we've seen the mental tenacity of this team wilt, I think. So I would, does a lack of improvement need to be addressed? Absolutely. But I think it's something that's shared, because at some point someone's just got to step up and say, guys, this is embarrassing and it's going to keep us from our goals. And that simply never happened, especially on defense, but even on offense as well. Because, even just in his pregame press conference, Tom Crean was talking about how the team needs to, do a better job of making the extra pass and doing all that. And it's the same stuff. I realize there are going to be consistent comments a coach is going to make and themes he's going to come back to. They just never seem to change for this team. It's like we never settled something and then built on it. We've kind of been dealing with the same things all season long.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Coaches can only put you through drills and tell you something so many times before it gets repetitive and you tune it out. So it's, of course, when a team loses or doesn't play well or doesn't develop, it's on the coaching staff. There's no question. But you've also got to fault the players too, because like you said, it doesn't seem like anybody's stepping up and saying, hey, guys, we got to get better. We've got to fix this. We've got to change this. And that's something that, you have leadership from the coaching staff, and you also have leadership on the floor. And the guys who were the leaders on this team over the last couple weeks, needed to step up and affect change. And they haven't. And, it's hard to put so much on college kids, but at the same time, if you want to achieve those goals, it comes from both the coaching staff and the players, and the improvement has to come also on kids, on their own time. When you go into the gym and work, that gym is available to you. Cook Hall is a very nice building, and it's a nice place to spend time. Go in and work on your game, and we've seen past players in this program do it, and that's, I'm not saying these guys don't do it, but I'm saying that's one way to get it. It's not all on practice time. It's on what you want to do and how good you want to be. It really depends on you putting in the effort.
I feel a little bad for Travis Trice right now, because his NBA career may have just taken a severe hit, as Tom Crean has said Travis Trice will make an NBA roster someday. And unfortunately, Coach Crean does not have a great if everybody that Tom Crean said was going to be on an NBA roster was on an NBA roster, I think they'd have to have 60 teams. And I get it. I know Tom Crean's trying to be positive and pump up an opponent and all that stuff, but it does amuse me, some of the guys that he has said would play on NBA rosters. Which, and that actually leads me, I guess, into a point, which is, and I mentioned this on Twitter with somebody today talking about James Blackman Jr., that sometimes your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. And I think for Tom Crean, his positivity and his optimism and his energy, they clearly have been his greatest strength, and they were his greatest strength certainly the first 3 or 4 years at Indiana when things were bad, but it seemed like his just indefatigable stamina was keeping this program alive. And unfortunately, I feel like that's kind of become a weakness for him now, because that bullheadedness and just kind of this feeling that you can just outwork your problems hasn't really helped, I think, the teams the last few years, because they fade physically and mentally down the stretch. And I think sometimes we kind of bull charge ahead on a certain strategy and it doesn't work and we don't change it. So, and I always get to thinking about that with James Blackman Jr., because you just want to slap your head at some of the shots he takes, and just how just unyieldingly willing he is to constantly attack on offense. And yet, there at the end of the second half, he helped bring us back, and you kind of needed that. And it's clearly with something like that, it's all about learning how to balance it. But I just think that this program seems to have an issue with that. With not having great balance. It's like last year, we're all defense and no offense, and there's really no ability to kind of shift. And this year, we're all offense and no defense. And I have to think, a program is always going to take on the identity of its leader, and I think to a certain respect, it does a little bit with Tom Crean. And I don't necessarily mean that as an indictment. I mean, it's him, and I think overall he was good for this program, and he's done a good job, and we'll see what the future holds for him. But again, I think as we look toward the future and what can improve with this team, at some point being able to balance out your big strengths by not allowing the polar opposite of their weakness to take hold so much is really going to be an important thing, both for individual players and for the program as a whole. Because everything just always seems to be extreme. And I guess that's partly the nature of Indiana basketball, both inside and outside the program. But at some point, things need to feel a little bit steadier, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. It seems like we're either a complete disappointment or exceeding expectations, and it seems, especially with this team, and it just seems to flip flop back and forth every 2 weeks. And yeah, I mean, if you think about it, less than a month ago we were saying, hey, you know what? They lost to Maryland, but that was a hell of a basketball game. They played really well. And, we felt really positive about the team. Then they blew the doors off Minnesota. You're thinking, okay, it's February 15th, and we need 2 wins out of our next, 5 games, 3 of which are very winnable. And, you lose to Purdue in a really, really tough game. And then you killed Rutgers and was a glorified scrimmage. And then you lose to Northwestern Iowa and Michigan State in a row. 2 of those games at home, and the road game was against the worst of the 3. And it's just, it's one of those things where, like you said, there's just extremes. A month ago, we were really high on this team. They went into Maryland against a very good Maryland team that has only gotten better, and went punch for punch with them and had a shot at the end to win it. And it's just a letdown. You're right. It's a complete letdown. I mean, I'm sitting here doing this. Listen, you guys watching know I love to talk, and I'm just sitting here having a tough time finding the words. I really am. I mean, I love to talk. I love to talk about IU basketball, and I love doing this postgame show. But right now, I'm thinking, how much time's left? How much more do we have to talk about this team? I mean, it's serious. I just it's tiring. It really is tiring to watch this team and watch it collapse and see the inevitability of it, and then have to go on and go over it and over and over it, because it's a team-wide lethargy that just makes it no fun to watch. I mean, you've got individual guys. Certainly Yogi plays his balls off. Nick Zeisloft played so hard today. But other than that, you've just got guys who are just going through the motions, and it's almost – and I don't think they think that. I don't think if you ask them, shot them up with truth serum and asked them, they'd tell you they were playing hard, but it's clearly not there, and something is clearly missing. And,
Right as you said that, a tweet came up, Sam Bashusin quoting Tom Crean, I thought our guys played fantastically hard today, which, is kind of to your point.
At times they did. I mean, look, the first 20 minutes they did play pretty hard in the first half, but in the key moments of the game, in which, I'm sorry, I know the last 5 minutes are very important, but that first 15 minutes of the second half is pretty damn important as well. And you just felt like sometimes they were going through the motions. And I agree. The first half they played very hard. Last 5 minutes they played very hard, but that 15-minute block lost them the game. And, you just feel like they don't know that they have an extra gear that they can kick into.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's you had a key word there, inevitability. I think the reason why I got so excited about this season, in the middle of the Big Ten season, and even after the Purdue loss, is I thought the season was going to be different than past seasons. I thought we'd overcome that inevitability and finish strong. I mean, do you realize this team has whimpered to 0-3 since I wrote that post? Is Indiana peaking at the right time? Have I ever wrote a more worthless piece of garbage than that blog post?
I don't want to cast aspersions, but
I mean,
it's
just fact at this point.
But I think people felt that way. I mean, you had such a great game against Maryland. You dominated Minnesota. You fought as hard as you could against Purdue with a terrible matchup and almost overcame it. And then you destroyed Rutgers by 30. You're feeling, okay, this team's getting some momentum going. I mean, none of those performances were bad. those 4 games in a row where they played pretty well. I mean, against Purdue, look, there's only so much you can do against 2 7-footers, and we talked about that at length. And they almost overcame those problems. And then you kill Rutgers and you feel good about it. And we talked about it at the time. I mean, they had 3 games left. You felt like to be secure in your tournament spot, you got to win 2 of them, at least 1 for sure. And one of them's at Northwestern. Come on. And then at home against Iowa. I'm sorry, Iowa's not a very good team. We got our asses kicked by Iowa. So, it's just one of those things where everything looked good. And it's amazing how much can change in a few weeks, but, you feel like it's completely changed and just headed for a nosedive right now.
So what do you think Indiana needs to do in the Big Ten tournament? And I haven't looked at this yet, but is when we play and who we play still going to be determined by what Illinois does today against Purdue, or is it already set?
I think it is going to be determined because we're 9-9 and they're 9-8.
Okay.
But they're on the road against Purdue, so.
Oh, that's right, and we win the tiebreaker if we tie with them. Okay.
So I think we're going to wind up being the 7 seed and play. I believe it's Northwestern now.
Northwestern.
Or if Minnesota loses, it'll probably be Minnesota, I think. But it's one of the two. So we're either going to play Northwestern or Minnesota, it looks like, and we'll be the 7 seed. We got to win 2 games minimum, I think, to even have a chance at the tournament at this point. So you've got to win that first game for sure, and then you've got to win the second. I think you have to win 2. I don't think 20 wins does it when you go 9-9 in conference. So. 20 wins, you can look at it and say, hey, at least we got to 20 wins, but I don't think you can hang your hat on the tournament. They do have, 6 top 50 wins or something, and have a decent – Dan Dockich runs down that schedule so much, but I thought their out-of-conference was actually okay this year. Sure, those bottom 300 wins are pointless, but I feel like most of the teams that are going to be in the mix for major conferences probably have similar resumes, and Indiana – played better against the top competition. So Andy's the bracketologist, but my assumption would be you got to win 2 games no matter what, and then hope some mid-major teams win their conference tournaments and don't wind up being at large bids.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Andy comes up with, because it's not out of the question that when all the numbers end up being crunched, that Indiana still kind of sneaks in. I think Andy even said we could lose these last 3 games and still be in just because the bubble's so weak. Now, that seems absurd and ridiculous to say, and I'm not trying to hang my hat on it. I'm just trying to offer a little bit of perspective that this team isn't as far away from the bubble or from even being in the tournament as it feels like after these last 3 games, but that's really just small, infinitesimally small, really, consolation after another.
Indiana's RPI was 50 coming into today. That's better than Illinois and Purdue. And Purdue's 11-6 in conference or something like that. So, and their BPI, which some people like and some people don't, was also 50. So, they're not. It's not like they're way out of it and need to come all the way back. They're within that 64. But, the problem's going to be who loses their conference tournaments. And if, like last year, a lot of teams lost, Indiana wasn't going to make the tournament anyway, but a lot of teams losing knocked them even out of the NIT. So it just really depends on how this next week and a half shakes out, or I guess just next week at this point. But, yeah, it's about how this next week shakes out. But at the same time, the key to getting in the tournament, and it has always been this way, is to take care of your own business and not worry about anybody else. Indiana down the stretch has not taken care of business, and that's the true problem. And also, some people are saying, they've lost 8 out of 12, blah, 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 blah. That's not supposed to matter. It's not in the official selection committee's handbook. There's a rule that says all wins and losses are supposed to be treated equally. Now, does it seep into the mind of the tournament selection people? I'm sure it does, but that's actually not supposed to matter. Andy's
even said anecdotally he's seen evidence that it doesn't really matter. So, but you're right. There's still human beings making decisions. So, last topic here before we go on about our Saturday. So obviously this was a crazy week just with speculation and this, that, and the other and all this stuff going on. And I appreciate that today, no one sent us questions asking us to speculate on names and all that stuff, and we're not going to get into it. speculating on names. Tom Crean has the job right now. Shoot, there was a time it seemed like there might be some kind of announcement before the Michigan State game, or maybe there will still be some kind of announcement before the Big Ten tournament. We have no idea. So we try as much as possible on this show to stick with the things that have happened, the game, or what's immediately going to happen next. So the only reason that I want to bring this up at all is I will say that where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And so I don't know what the fire is, but this team really does look over the last 3 games like a team that is distracted. That, to a certain extent, I know they fought at the end of the game today, but the overall picture to me of this team is a team that is somewhat worn down and maybe kind of gasping to the finish line, and they seem like a team that might be distracted by stuff not on the court. And I have no way of knowing that for sure. I just, it's like last year. I think we got certain senses, and you watch the team, and then you find out about stuff after the season. It's like, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense why they played like that. And I'm kind of getting that sense with this team now. And so I don't offer that up to blame it on anything specifically, but clearly there's something going on, and we don't know any of the details of it, but that matches what I'm seeing with just the eye test of just watching the team and watching the program, which just looks like a program distracted, which is a damn shame because there was a good season here at one point that has turned into a big pile of nothing. Not nothing, but you know what I mean. And so anyway, that's frustrating. That's disappointing because whatever that is seems to have really affected this team down the stretch, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I still, from my Bloomington days, have some sources in the athletic department and have built relationships with people over the years. Let me say this definitively: no one knows what's going on. If there is anything going on, it is between the coach and the athletic director, and maybe some people, involved in the higher ups. But it's not like there's some big secret, hanging out there that everybody is just keeping and is going to leak out. I think that the people I know are pretty well placed and have told me lots of stuff about the program that wound up being true, and they're sort of just shrugging their shoulders. They're not sure where any of these rumors are coming from because it's not coming from them. So I think that some of them are, that are getting posted on sites like Peegs or Inside the Hall are being posted from friend of a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing, and people are taking it as gospel. Right now, most of the people in the athletic department don't know anything definitively. They're hearing the rumors, they're asking about it, and they are being told, there's nothing to it, or they're just being told nothing is settled. So I think people should calm down. I don't believe, first of all, Tom Crean's not getting fired before the season is over. That is definitive, 100%. He's not going to be fired. So anybody calling for that, you're just wasting your energy. He's not going to be fired before the season's over. Whether or not the two sides decide to part mutually or whatever, Tom Crean is going to coach the rest of the season. There may be an announcement before the season's over or something like that, but he will be the coach for the rest of the season as far as I understand it. As far as, all the names being thrown around and stuff like that, that is pure speculation at this point. There have been no feelers sent out to any coaches as far as I understand it. It's just all speculation. It's people, putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5. There is no movement in that direction right now as far as I know, and the people I've talked to are very well placed. So I don't believe that there's any reason to get worked up on that. I think that the athletic department as a whole is concentrated on this season right now and this season only, and when this season is over, whatever they're going to do, they're going to do.
Good, which is how it should be. Well said. All right, I'm just only going to make you talk one more time, I promise. I know you're hating it today, but just one more time, final thoughts on today.
It's just disappointment, I think. I mean, you can't be mad at these kids. They're trying. This isn't a team revolt or anything like that, like you saw with the, Denver Nuggets on Brian Shaw or something like that. These guys aren't quitting. I think that it's just disappointment because of how talented this team is and how close it is to being a very, very good basketball team. And just not getting there, and it's disappointment because you saw the flashes and you saw what could have been. And I give Yogi Ferrell a lot of credit. I know he's had some tough moments this year, like missing the three-pointer at the end of the Maryland game, and today missing the free throw that could have sent it to overtime. But you know what? That kid should never hang his head. He plays every play like it's his last. And if this was his last game at Assembly Hall, we were very, very lucky to have watched him play. I hope he comes back. I would love to watch him be our point guard for another year. There's no one else in the country I would rather have playing that position for my team. He's a great kid who plays very hard at all times and has really developed as a player. I think that's an underrated thing, is how much he's developed since his first year. He was not a great shooter his first year. He has been phenomenal in that aspect. I think he plays hard, regardless of what Dan Dockich says about his defense. Our biggest fan, Dan Dockich, says about his defense. I think he plays very hard defensively. He may not be the best defender on the planet, but he plays very hard and he works hard. And I think it would be sad if we never get to see him in Assembly Hall again. But if we did, if that's it, we're very lucky to have gotten to watch him play.
Yep, I echo that completely. For me, I thought we spent some time after the Iowa game talking about the fans and some disappointment at the booing and that kind of thing. And I thought, for the most part, I thought the crowd did a good job today. I mean, I don't think it was a packed house, although I didn't see the pictures of the balcony or anything like that. And it certainly didn't sound as crazy as the better IU crowds, but I thought the fans were there. Just, it always seemed like they were waiting for something to happen, and it never quite did until right there at the end. But I think I was encouraged by what I saw, how Indiana fans kind of reacted and vented after the Iowa game, and I get that, but really seemed to come around by today and really have a more positive outlook. I mean, this was such a crazy week. And I don't know what it is about this program. I mean, I guess that could be a topic for an entire episode. Why everything's just so crazy and seems so extreme, and this was a crazy week. But I felt like the sense I got, from my house here in Dallas. So how much do I really know? But just the sense from people emailing me and on Twitter that the IU community seemed to rally together and around the team, having some good positive feelings about this game without really any reason to, based on how they've played in the last two games. And I think I saw Dan Dockich tweet something that, why is Assembly Hall, or why is IU a special place to play at? Because the fans gave the team a standing ovation after the game. I didn't see it because I ran in here to start getting set up for the show, but I sure hope that's true. And I think it's important always to realize that I think in college sports, so much more than professional sports, I think, a fan base, you can have an impact. And I think the Indiana fans and what happens at Assembly Hall, it has an impact. And it has that impact because individual people make choices to be a certain way, to cheer when maybe they're not given a reason to not boo when maybe they could, to not scream an obscenity at an opposing player because it's just not the right thing to do. And I think that's why I've always been so proud to be a part of Hoosier Nation and a part of this fan base. And so I think there are always these opportunities where you kind of get those gut check moments to say, I got to make a choice to go one way or the other. And I thought, in a certain respect, I didn't like a lot of what I saw in the Iowa game, but I liked a lot more of what I saw heading into this Michigan State game, just in terms of being proud of this larger community that we all are, and that makes this so special. Because that's why we do these post-game shows, and that's why Indiana basketball is so special, because there's a little piece of us still there in Bloomington that we see on the court. We've been there before. And so there's a shared experience, and I think that's what makes it special. And I think we can't forget that. If it's always just about the wins and losses, I think those make it more fun, no question about it. But it's the community that makes it special. And so I think we've always got to hold on to that as much as we can. And if I seemed a little crazy or over the top with those two blog posts this week, it's just because it means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to everybody else. And so I wanted to put those thoughts out there, and I appreciate everybody who responded to them, to agree or disagree, because I think just because I say something doesn't make it right. It's just my opinion, and it's important that we all respect each other's opinions and have the dialogue. But I was encouraged that we had it, and that the passion of Hoosier Nation certainly is still there. And now we've just got to try and channel that passion into helping guide the program as much as we can for the future with whoever the coach is, whatever recruits come, whoever stays or goes. Indiana basketball will be here. The Cream and Crimson will be here. And we'll all be here, and we'll be here with post-game shows. It feels like the end of the season's over, but it's not. We still have games again in the Big Ten tournament. I will say this right now. We forgot to give our official predictions. I'm pretty much done ever predicting. I'm Mr. Positivity,
Well,
Mr. Optimism.
We can't give a prediction. We don't know who they're going to play.
Yeah, no. But I think I may give a prediction. I'm just so pessimistic about the Big Ten tournament. It's like the one place where I have zero confidence that I'm just going to pick a loss, because it's Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. I just have a hard time thinking we're going to go in there and win a game in the Big Ten tournament. I hope I'm wrong. I certainly hope I'm wrong, but that's just my thoughts. Maybe I'm overdoing it.
I reserve my pick until I figure out who we're playing. But yeah, I mean, it's the Big Ten tournament has always been a house of horrors for Indiana, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I hope I'm wrong, and I'm half kidding. I will wait to see who the opponent is, but that hasn't been a very good place for us. All right, anyway, thank you all very much for coming, for watching. Assemblycall.com/subscribe is the email list. It's the fastest growing IU basketball email newsletter, so we hope that you join it. Andy was not able to join us tonight, but I'm sure he will be doing his stats, and we'll send out the email tomorrow. And then we'll have his bracketology. Look for that Tuesday, and we'll probably do either an Over On Podcast on the Brink or a special edition here with bracketology heading into the Big Ten tournament. What does Indiana need to do? We'll get down to brass tacks. Do they need to win one game? Do they need to win two? We'll get definitive answers from the people who know it best so that we know what the stakes are heading into the Big Ten tournament. All right, everybody, enjoy your Saturday. Thanks for watching. We will talk to you after the Big Ten tournament game.